Well, this one should come as no surprise to any of you. I love the Decemberists, and I love, their flavor of music. I came onto the scene with them fairly early on. I think just after the Crane Wife dropped, that was when I, really fell in love with them. And I don't want to be the whole like I knew them before they were cool kind of thing, because I know that I was not. In comparison, I was probably very late to the scene. But like their blending of indie rock with progressive rock was something that I wish more indie artists would do. And yeah, with that little caveat, let's just dive right into it. Somewhere out beyond these melodies in my head. As it ever was, so will it be again by the Decemberists. So, the Decemberists, for those of you that do not know, are a indie rock band from Portland, Oregon, getting their start in, I believe, 2000, like very early 2000. And it consists of Colin Malloy, Chris Funk, Jenny Connolly, Nate Query, and John Moen. This is their 9th studio record, if you can believe it. I found out about them on the Prog Archives website when they uploaded the Mariner's Revenge song, as well as the first track from Her Majesty, the shanty for Ertheus, I believe is what it is. Absolutely loved both of those tracks, and I loved how dark and menacing and insane that first track of Shanty for Ertheus was. And then I listened to the rest of Her Majesty, and it wasn't that. We get Billy Liar and a song from Maya Gladberg and The Soldiering Life and As I Rise and all these like really big, fun kind of tracks, and less of that like rating and dark and menacing tracks. It was a little bit of a switcheroo. I just realized I did a full worst to best of their records, and you can find that right up there. So you can get kind of like what I love about these guys. And as I mentioned, I love their deep prog aspects. So The Hazards of Love from them is one of my favorite albums of all time. It's my favorite album from them. So spoilers on my worst to best for them. And I love how this band, up until The King is Dead, would really plant themselves on one style, one vibe of the sound that they were trying to capture. This was found from Castaway and Cutouts and Her Majesty, Picturesque, The Crane Wife, Hazards of Love, and The King is Dead. So each one really had that signature sound of whatever it was that they were going for. And I feel like when they came back on the stage with What a Terrible World, What a Wonderful World, and I'll Be Your Girl, I felt like they were going all over the place. There wasn't that signature sound. There wasn't that signature vibe that either of these albums had. It was just kind of whatever music was laying around at that time. And I feel as if now coming into As It Ever Was, So Shall It Be Again, is kind of marrying the two. On the one hand, it is very similar to, say, like a Picturesque or a Her Majesty, in that we're kind of playing with a lot of different genres. We're playing with a lot of different sounds, very similar to those albums. But we're not completely all over the place like it was with I'll Be Your Girl and What a Terrible World, What a Beautiful World. Within this one, I feel as if there's a particular vibe that they're going for. There's definitely a unified sound that they are at least aiming for on most of these tracks. And that is what I really appreciate. And I think one of the things that I love the most about this record is how unified all these tracks are, even though they're playing with a lot of different styles. The album opens up with Burial Ground, which is, one of the leading singles off of this record. And it's the quintessential Decemberist track for the 2020s. It's dripping in metaphors and story, and that's one of the things that I love. I really love Colin's ability to craft a story through his song, and very, literature type of stories, and the burial ground being not only a place where we bury our dead, but sometimes where we bury our dreams or our ideas, or, where we come when we have faced a great loss, and that idea of the burial ground being that kind of metaphor for it. And the music, like I said, very standard Decemberists, and the moment I listen to it, I'm like, oh yeah, we're back. We're back in the seat of the Decemberists. And then we move on to a track like Oh No, the second track, and Man, again, we're back, baby. I love how it's almost like this Western calypso kind of a sound, or maybe it's a tango. Kind of taking these two different genres and kind of like really playing with it between one another. Now, on streaming sites, it's just an instrumental. At least that's what I've noticed within the past couple of days. Before, it used to have like a whole lyrical section, and I don't know what's going on with that, of why it's now just instrumental. But yeah, it's kind of showcasing once again what I love about Decemberists and being able to take these two different genres and being able to kind of capture the essence of this storytelling. And along that line, and as I mentioned, and how, we're kind of back in terms of the driver's seat, we get a very stereotypical Decemberist track with the Reapers, the third track, and being a little bit more haunting, a little bit more of a cautionary tale in that sense. And I don't know, this was one of the first tracks that it didn't quite click with me. And no matter how many times I sit back and re-listen to it, I haven't quite felt that connection to it quite yet. And I'm sure at some point it will eventually click, but it just quite hasn't happened yet. Then we come to the Long White Veil, which is very akin to a lot of the tracks that we have with the Decemberists, and I feel as if it's taking a page off of the Leslie Ann Levine track from Castaways and Cutouts, and there was another track, I believe it was either from the Crane Wife or Picturesque, which was kind of like a follow-up, of this new mother or whatnot that had to drown her kid because she knew it wasn't going to work or it wasn't going to last, and kind of like the daughter now singing to her mother, and it's kind of feeling along the same ways where it's like this child, this could be passed away child that's now looking at her mother, or this concept of the long white veil. Is this person being wed against their will? Again, it's very singer-songwriter. It's very, telling of a tale that's probably a little bit darker than it has any right to be. Then we get a flavor from like The King is Dead, or the, kind of the somber moments from Castaways and Cutouts, like Grace Cathedral Hill or something like that, with William Fitzwilliam. And again, much like the Reapers, I didn't quite feel as connected with this one. It's a little bit more on the folky aspect, and, I love a good folk tale, but not in this kind of a sense, and it was just kind of like, I don't want to say a forgettable track in terms of a Decemberist, but something that I was waiting for it to do something, have those silky smooth choruses that a Grace Cathedral Hill had, or a kind of a fun turn of phrase that we would have got from The King is Dead. And I think one of the things that I'm not as big of a fan for this record, and why it's been a little bit of a challenge for me, is kind of the flow, because the next track we have is Don't Go Into the Woods, and after kind of the somber tracks of Long White Veil, William Fitzwilliam, and Don't Go Into the Woods, which is another somber track, I was really waiting for something with a little bit more get up and go, a little bit more of an oomph, because I should really like Don't Go Into the Woods, but because we've had these three somber tracks kind of back to back to back, they start to get lost in the weeds. They start to get bogged down just a hair. This trend continues with the Black Maria, as well as All I Want Is You, with being somber, being a little bit more introspective, and I think this was kind of the flavor that they were going for. I think this was kind of their MO, and this could have really, really worked if they had maybe spaced these out a little bit more, or if they kind of did one half of the album much more somber and the other half a little bit more get up and go and a little bit more driven. If you had the tracks like Burial Ground and Oh No and the Reapers kind of being at the latter half of this album, I think it would have been a lot more digestible, could have been, because then you get into Born in the Morning, American Made, and Tell Me What's on Your Mind, that are a lot more get up and go. They're a lot more accessible. They're a lot more jovial in that sense. And I really appreciate the kind of mood settings that we've got on here. It's a lot more toe tapping. It's a lot more of that kind of oomph, that more energetic tracks that I really enjoy. And I love America Made Me. It's very picturesque in that sense. We're getting that like 16 Military Wives, or Billy the Liar, or, something that's very like bumping, very happy and very excitable. even if it's not a great feeling on it. Like the most one-to-one we have on here is the 16 Military Wives. Then we come into Never Satisfied, and I feel as if this track was the essence of this album. You know, this was the flavor that they were going for throughout the entire record run. The first half of this is very somber. It's very quiet in approach, but it's very, you know, layered and textured in that sense. And then the second half is a little bit more oomph. You got a little bit more flavors in it. There's a little bit more of a jovial aspect to it. Then we come to the big one, the 19-minute track of Joan in the Garden. You know, I'm feeling flavors of the big epics from Decemberists. You know, you got The Train, you've got The Island, you know, you got those big 15, 10, 20-minute tracks that I absolutely love. And this one I think might be the longest of them. And I have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with this. On the one hand, I love the fact that a big band like the Decemberists is out there making a 20-minute track. I think that is great. I applaud them for it. Please, more bands do this. But the flow needs some work. Now, I don't mean the flow in terms of, you know, the actual ebb and flow of this, because I think it's handled very, very well. The first, you know, 7 to 8 minutes is just this really slow burn. It's this gradual thing. You've got the chorus, you've got the strings, you've got the choir, really building up this track and really laying the groundworks for it. Then it goes into this really big, powerful minstrel of this track that I really appreciate and I really love. But then we get this dip. You know, we get this weird kind of a dip that we would have with tracks, you know, for going into the big prog works, like Close to the Edge and like Echoes. But unlike Close to the Edge and Echoes, where you had something to kind of string you along this kind of wasteland, this no man's land, this one doesn't really have anything. It's just kind of wandering the landscape, very atmospheric. It's very ambient sound and ambient noise without any solidification, without any congealment within the soundscapes to really allow a touchstone for the listener to look forward to. But the ending of this is so powerful and so astute that, you know, it almost justifies the length of it. And I really do wish that they had elongated the ending. They had stretched out that big play out. They added another chorus to it. They added something really oomph and really powerful to really send this home. You know, stretch it. I would even say stretch it into the 23 minute mark with an extra chorus to really justify the weight that we had to get to it, because that ending is so powerful. It's so driven. I just feel as if that lull that we had kind of in that no man's land, again, add some really quirky soundscapes. Use the synths. You know, I know Jenny Connolly is good on creating atmosphere and good on creating some really nice textures. So let her cook, let her play. Really allow for some, you know, wild and crazy stuff, because that's what you are able to do with a soundscape section like this. This is an odd one for me because I don't necessarily come back to this all that much, even if this is the kind of stuff that I beg bands to do. You know, I beg and plead that bands will do something like this. So yeah, and that's how the album ends, and that is the album proper. So yeah, in the end, this album is on the one hand a little bit of a mixed grab bag. You know, it's a little bit of a mixed grab bag, but I think there's this unified sound that tethers all these tracks together in a way that I'll Be Your Girl and What a Terrible World didn't have. I feel as if I'll come back to this album a little bit more often than the latter two, but I don't know if I'm going to come back to it as much as anything from The King is Dead prior. So we're still kind of in this less than excitable, less lackluster period within the Decemberists, and I'm really hoping that the next album will be the one that kind of puts them back on where I love for them. But what we got is still a really good treat. So my final rating for this album is, As It Ever Was, So It Will Be Again by the Decemberists. It's one that I would definitely download. Again, this is a great album to have on your computer, have on the go. If you don't pick this one up, I don't think you're really missing anything, and this wouldn't necessarily be my start for the Decemberists catalog. I would either start with Castaways and Cutouts or Picturesque from them, and then if you like more of their indie stuff, you know, go to The King is Dead and Her Majesty, and if you love more of their prog work, then go to The Crane Wife or Hazards of Love, and then leave the other three albums on for a late rainy day. But that's what I've got for As It Ever Was, So Shall It Be Again from the Decemberists. What did you guys think about this record? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Was it a disappointment or was it a surprise? Let me know all about that by commenting down below. And that's what I've got for you guys today. So, thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.